"You need to leave before the honor guard gets here." My brother said it quietly, which somehow made it worse. We were standing beside our father's open grave in the veterans section of Cedar Ridge Cemetery. The November wind kept lifting the corners of the folded programs, and somebody's little American flag had come loose from the soft ground. It rolled between the chairs until it stopped against my black shoe. Daniel looked past me toward the parking lot, making sure the county donors had not heard him. "Dad wanted soldiers at his funeral," he said, "not the one who embarrassed him." For a moment, all I could hear was canvas snapping over the burial tent. I had flown medical evacuation helicopters for more than 2 decades. I had carried burned teenagers, broken infantrymen, and one Afghan interpreter's newborn daughter through weather that grounded better pilots than me. But Daniel had repeated the same story for 13 years, that I had panicked during my final deployment, wrecked an aircraft, and been pushed out of the army. I had never corrected him in public. That morning I almost did. Then I saw our mother sitting in the front row with both hands wrapped around Dad's old cane. Her face looked smaller than it had at the hospital. Grief had taken all the sharp edges out of her. Starting a fight beside the grave would not bring my father back, so I picked up the little flag, pressed its wooden stem into the soil, and stepped away from the family chairs. Daniel mistook that for surrender. He always had. The white government van arrived 3 minutes later. 6 soldiers climbed out in dress blues. Their movements were quiet and practiced. One carried the folded burial flag, another checked the distance to the grave. The senior non-commissioned officer walked behind them, studying the ground the way experienced soldiers study every unfamiliar place. He was broad through the shoulders, gray beginning at his temples. I knew him before he knew me. Sergeant First Class Isaac Cole had been 24 years old the last time I saw him. His uniform had been soaked with blood. One boot was missing. He was strapped to a litter in the back of my helicopter, while warning lights burned across the instrument panel. At Cedar Ridge, he took 4 more steps. Then he saw me standing alone beyond the last row of chairs. His entire body stopped. The young soldiers behind him nearly walked into one another. Daniel noticed. He straightened his tie and stepped forward, already wearing the solemn expression he used for campaign photographs. Sergeant Cole did not look at him. He removed his gloves. Then he started walking directly toward me. To understand why my brother's face changed before Cole said a single word, you have to understand what silence had cost our family. 7 days earlier, I had been repairing a loose hinge on my kitchen cabinet when Daniel called. He did not say hello. "Dad's gone," he said. The screwdriver slipped from my hand and struck the linoleum point first. It stayed upright for half a second before falling over. My father and I had spoken the previous Sunday. He had asked whether the cottonwoods behind my house had turned yellow. I told him they had. Neither of us mentioned the argument we had been avoiding for 13 years. "When is the service?" I asked. Daniel breathed out through his nose. "Friday. But Rachel, before you make plans, there's something you need to understand." That sentence had been doing damage in our family since childhood. It always meant Daniel had already decided what everyone else was allowed to feel. I set the phone on speaker and sat at the kitchen table. Dad's unopened birthday card was there, tucked beneath a grocery receipt. I had been saving it for a visit we both kept postponing. "Dad didn't want a scene," Daniel said over the phone. He was very clear about that. I looked at the birthday card. My father's handwriting leaned hard to the right, as if every word were walking into wind. "What scene are you expecting?" I asked. There was a pause. I heard a copier running and a woman asking whether the blue yard signs had arrived. Daniel was calling from his campaign office. "You know how people talk," he said. "The Veterans Association will be there, county commissioners. Local press. Dad spent his life protecting his name." The sentence settled between us. My father had spent 31 years teaching auto mechanics at the high school. He fixed neighbors' cars for the cost of parts and kept a coffee can full of spare keys for people who were always losing theirs. He had never cared about his name until Daniel decided it had political value. "I'll sit in the back," I said. "That may not be enough." I opened the kitchen drawer. Under a bundle of takeout menus lay a pilot's watch with a cracked black face and a leather strap burned stiff along one edge. It had stopped at 19 minutes past 2. I had carried it through 3 moves and 1 divorce. Some nights I could touch it without remembering the smell of hydraulic fluid. That night was not one of them, Daniel continued, People still remember what happened to you. What happened to me, that was how he described it, as if I had developed a public illness. The official investigation had taken 11 months. During that time, the Army said almost nothing, because aviation accidents are not solved by rumors. They are solved by wreckage patterns, maintenance logs, weather records, and testimony from people who would rather forget. My family did not wait for the investigation. Daniel filled the silence for them. At first he told relatives I had frozen during a combat mission. Later he said I had ignored orders. By the time I came home for Thanksgiving, the story had grown sharp edges. According to an aunt in Missouri, I had crashed because I was unstable. According to one of Daniel's friends, the Army had quietly discharged me to avoid embarrassment. Nobody asked whether any of it was true. They asked whether I was doing better. My mother started lowering her voice whenever she mentioned my service. Dad stopped introducing me as his daughter who flew helicopters. At church, he simply said I was between jobs. The first time I heard Daniel repeat the story in front of him, we were standing beside Dad's workbench. Daniel had brought over a bottle of bourbon and 2 men from the county business council. One of them asked what I had done in the Army. Daniel answered before I could. She flew for a while, he said, then there was an incident. He gave the word incident just enough weight to invite questions, while pretending he was too loyal to explain. Dad kept sorting socket wrenches. I waited for him to look up. He never did. Dad's wrench settled into the tray without a sound. Daniel's lie could be challenged. Silence from someone you love becomes architecture. Before long, everybody lives inside it. I could have corrected the story. I had the investigation findings. I had my retirement orders. I had a citation folded in a fireproof box beneath my winter blankets. But the report also named the people we lost: Chief Warrant Officer Melissa Grant, my co-pilot; Staff Sergeant Owen Price, our crew chief; Specialist Noah Reed, our medic. Their families had already endured reporters, memorials, and strangers, reducing complicated lives to a few sentences. I could not defend myself without opening a door that belonged partly to them. So I told myself silence was restraint. For years I believed restraint was the same thing as dignity. Daniel learned to use it. At family dinners, he made small corrections to conversations that did not need correcting. Rachel doesn't like talking about the Army. Rachel had a difficult separation. Rachel's health has been unpredictable. Each sentence was close enough to concern that nobody called it cruelty. When our mother asked why I drove an old Subaru, Daniel said military retirement did not pay what people thought. When I left a Christmas gathering early because fireworks were being set off in the street, he told everyone loud noises still made me unstable. The truth was simpler. I left because I had an early shift at a volunteer aviation safety workshop the next morning, and because I no longer enjoyed explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. Dad heard most of it. Sometimes his jaw tightened. Sometimes he changed the subject. Once he followed me to my car and stood with one hand on the roof while frost gathered on his coat. "I know your brother gets carried away," he said. "You could tell him to stop." He stared toward the house. Through the front window, Daniel was laughing beside the Christmas tree. "He's trying to build something for himself, so am I." Dad nodded, but he did not apologize. That was his weakness. He confused keeping the family together with asking the quietest person to absorb the damage. After he became sick, Daniel's version of me became useful. He began driving Dad to appointments, managing insurance calls, and posting photographs. I lived 3 hours away and came every other weekend, but those visits rarely appeared online. Daniel's campaign page called him a devoted son, a small business advocate, and a lifelong supporter of veterans. In one photograph, he stood beside Dad's wheelchair holding a sign that read, "Families never leave their own behind." I stared at that picture. Then I closed the app and called my father. He sounded tired. "Danny says you're running yourself ragged," I told him. "He means well, does he?" Dad was quiet long enough for me to hear the oxygen machine release its sigh. "There are things I should have said years ago," he whispered. I waited, but a nurse entered, and the moment disappeared beneath questions about medication. That was our last conversation. Now Daniel was telling me not to attend the funeral because my presence might damage the family name. "What exactly did Dad say?" I asked. Daniel's answer came too quickly. He said he wanted the service to reflect the best of us. I looked down at the burned watch in my palm. For the first time, I wondered whether Daniel was not merely repeating a lie. I wondered whether he was protecting one. 3 days after Daniel's call, I drove to my father's house to help Mother sort his things. The garage smelled as it had when I was 16, motor oil, sawdust, wintergreen gum. Dad's toolbox still stood beneath the pegboard, every wrench outlined in black marker so he could tell what was missing. Mother sat on a folding chair with a blanket around her shoulders. She had placed 3 cardboard boxes on the floor. Keep, donate, Daniel. There was no box with my name. I did not mention it. Grief makes objects feel dangerous. A coffee mug can become evidence. A coat can become an accusation. I kept my hands busy because stopping would have meant admitting that my father had died before either of us found the courage to finish our last conversation. Near the back of the workbench, I found a manila folder sealed with blue painter's tape. My name was written across the front. Mother saw it. He told me not to open that, she said. When? Last spring. I ran my thumb over the tape. Did Daniel know? Her eyes moved toward the door. That was answer enough. Before I could ask another question, Daniel's truck pulled into the driveway. He entered carrying campaign posters. He kissed Mother's forehead, set the food down, and noticed the folder in my hand. His face changed for a second, then he smiled. Dad kept everything, he said. Probably old insurance paperwork. He reached for it. I moved the folder behind my hip. Daniel's smile remained, but his fingers closed around empty air. Rachel, he said, we have enough to deal with this week. I looked at the label. My father had used the same block lettering he used on parts bins. This has my name on it, and this is Mom's house. Mother lowered her eyes. That was how Daniel exercised power. He rarely ordered anyone directly. He made disagreement feel like disloyalty, then waited for the room to police itself. I put the folder in my bag. Daniel watched me do it. That evening I opened it at the motel. Inside were newspaper clippings, printed emails, and a copy of the Army accident investigation summary I had sent Dad 13 years earlier. The pages were still folded along the same lines. My helicopter had gone down during a nighttime medical evacuation in eastern Afghanistan. We had launched after a roadside bomb struck a patrol near the border. The weather was deteriorating, but the casualties included 2 men with internal bleeding. Waiting until morning would have meant choosing which one died. Melissa was flying from the left seat. I was aircraft commander. 42 minutes into the mission, the main transmission oil pressure dropped without warning. We turned toward the nearest forward operating base. Then the chip detector light came on. Those 2 warnings together meant metal was moving through the transmission. We had minutes, perhaps less, before the rotor system stopped doing what rotors are supposed to do. Melissa wanted to set down on a narrow riverbed below us. I agreed. On descent, the transmission seized. The helicopter yawed hard to the right. Melissa fought the pedals. I lowered the collective and pushed the nose forward, trying to preserve enough rotor speed for impact. We struck the riverbed tail first. The cabin rolled. The next thing I remember was hanging upside down, tasting blood and fuel. My left hand was still wrapped around the controls. The instrument panel had folded inward. Melissa was unconscious beside me. Behind us, Specialist Reed was alive and shouting that the patients were trapped. The aircraft caught fire near the rear bulkhead. I do not remember deciding to move. Training takes over in pieces. Release the harness. Find the exit. Count the living. We pulled 7 people from the wreckage before the fuel cell ruptured. Melissa died before the rescue team reached us. Price died at the field hospital. Reed survived the crash, but not the surgery that followed. 9 people came home alive, including both patients we had launched to save. The investigation found that a microscopic manufacturing defect in a transmission bearing had caused the failure. No pilot action could have prevented it. The report credited our crew with choosing the only survivable landing area within reach and completing an emergency descent under catastrophic mechanical failure. I received the Distinguished Flying Cross. I also received a permanent injury to my left shoulder, nerve damage in 2 fingers, and a medical restriction that ended my flying career. The Army did not throw me out. I remained on active duty for another 5 years, developing emergency procedures and training aviation crews to recognize early transmission failure. I retired as a Chief Warrant Officer 3 when the damage in my hand made continued service impractical. Daniel knew all that. He had attended the award ceremony. In the folder beneath the investigation summary, I found a photograph of him standing 10 feet behind me while a general pinned the medal to my uniform. Someone had drawn a black line through my face. I stared at it for a long time. The ink was not fresh, but it was not 13 years old either. The final pages explained why Daniel was afraid of the funeral. They were printouts from his campaign email account. Dad must have received them by mistake or printed them from the family computer. One message came from the director of the Tri-County Veterans Alliance, the organization scheduled to endorse Daniel 2 days after the burial. Their endorsement included access to donors and a fundraising event expected to close nearly $140,000 of Daniel's campaign deficit. The director had written, "Before we proceed, we need clarification regarding reports that your sister received an adverse military separation after an aviation incident. Given our mission, any appearance that your campaign misrepresented a veteran's record would create serious concerns." Daniel's reply appeared below it. "My sister has struggled with psychological instability since an accident overseas. Our family has protected her privacy for years. She will not be participating in any campaign or memorial events." He had not merely repeated an old family lie, he had placed it in writing. And he had used my silence as proof. The folder contained one final item. A note in my father's handwriting. "Rachel, I should have stopped this when it began. I told myself Daniel needed confidence and you did not need defending. That was cowardice dressed up as fairness. I am trying to correct what I allowed, but I may have waited too long." There was no signature. The note ended halfway down the page. For several minutes, I sat on the motel bed listening to the heater click on and off. My thumb stayed pressed against the final unfinished line. But unfinished apologies are cruel in their own way. They show you the door someone meant to open, without telling you whether they ever walked through it. My phone rang. "Daniel." I let it ring twice before answering. "Did you take something from the house?" he asked. "Yes, that folder contains private campaign material. It also contains my military record." His breathing changed. "You don't understand the timing. I understand it perfectly." For the first time in years, Daniel had no prepared sentence ready. I looked at Dad's unfinished note. "I'll be at the funeral," I said. "Rachel, listen to me." "No," it was the only word I gave him. Then I ended the call. Friday morning arrived with a low gray sky and the kind of cold that made every metal surface sting. I parked at the far edge of Cedar Ridge Cemetery beside a maintenance shed. Daniel had reserved the spaces near the chapel for family, donors, and members of the press. A volunteer in a campaign jacket checked his phone before stepping into my path. My photograph filled the screen beneath a message from Daniel, "Public lot. No family seating. Mr. Monroe asked me to escort you around the chapel," he said. "I'm not joining a campaign event," I said. "I'm burying my father." Across the wet pavement, Daniel kept smiling beneath the chapel awning with 2 county commissioners. He wore a black overcoat tailored close at the waist and a small flag pin on his lapel. Beside him, a photographer adjusted the angle of our mother's wheelchair. Daniel saw me. He excused himself from the commissioners and crossed the wet pavement. "You brought the folder," he said. It was not a question. The manila folder rested inside my handbag. I had made copies of everything and left the originals locked in my motel room. Not because I planned to expose Daniel. I still did not know what Dad had done with the information. But 13 years in Army aviation had taught me not to carry the only copy of anything important into a place I did not control. "I brought Dad's program," I said. Daniel stepped closer. "This is exactly what I was trying to prevent." "What? My presence?" "Your need to turn every family moment into a trial." A church bell rang once behind us. People began moving toward the chapel doors. I could have reminded him that he was the one who had described my medical history to donors. I could have told him about the photograph with my face crossed out. Instead, I looked at the campaign pin on his coat. "You have reporters at Dad's funeral. They covered his work with the Veterans Center. Dad repaired their vans twice. He believed in service." "So did I." Daniel's mouth tightened. Then our mother called my name. She sat beneath the awning with a wool blanket over her knees. When I approached, she lifted both hands toward me. I bent down and she held my face the way she had when I was a child with a fever. "You came," she whispered. I said I would. Her eyes moved toward Daniel. "He told me you might not," Daniel answered before I could. "Mom, the service is starting." Inside the chapel, the front 2 rows had white cards marked family. Daniel's wife and children filled one side. Mother's chair had been placed in the center aisle. On the opposite side sat campaign donors, local officials, and the director of the Tri-County Veterans Alliance. There was no card for me. The funeral director, a narrow man named Mr. Ellis, checked his seating list twice. "I'm sorry," he said softly. I was told the immediate family arrangement had been finalized. Daniel stood close enough to hear. "She's comfortable in the back." Mr. Ellis looked at me, then at the empty seat beside Mother. His face carried the exhausted caution of a man who had spent 30 years watching grief turn ordinary disagreements into permanent wounds. "Legally, ma'am, I can seat you wherever you prefer." Mother gripped the arm of her wheelchair. "Rachel should sit with me." The chapel became quiet in small circles. Daniel leaned down beside her. "Mom, we discussed this. Dad wanted the veterans' representatives near the front." Mother looked at the empty chair, then she looked at me. For 1 second, I thought she would insist. Instead, her shoulders lowered. "I don't want trouble," she said. Neither did I. That had been our family prayer for years. We did not ask for truth, we asked for the absence of noise. I walked to the last row. The service began with a hymn Dad used to whistle while changing brake pads. The pastor spoke about patience, community, and quiet acts of generosity. Daniel delivered the eulogy. He stood behind the lectern with one hand resting on Dad's folded reading glasses. "My father taught us that character is what you do when no one is watching," he said. The sentence almost made me laugh. Instead, I studied the stained glass window above him. A blue pane near the corner had been replaced with clear glass. Sunlight passed through it without color. Daniel described himself driving Dad to chemotherapy. He mentioned Mother's devotion. He thanked the Veterans Alliance for honoring a family shaped by military service. He did not say my name. Then he told the room that Dad had endured private heartbreak caused by the lasting effects of war on someone he loved. Several people turned toward me. There it was. He had not accused me directly. He had done something more effective. He had placed the lie inside grief, where challenging it would make me look cruel. The director of the Veterans Alliance lowered his eyes. Daniel saw him. Relief softened my brother's face. He believed he had solved the problem. After the chapel service, we followed the casket along a narrow paved path toward the gravesite. The press photographer walked backward in front of Daniel and Mother. I stayed behind the last cluster of mourners. At the burial tent, white cards again marked the family chairs. This time, Daniel did not wait for confusion. He placed one hand against the back of the final chair and said, loudly enough for the donors to hear, "That section is for family." A few people looked away. Mother's lips parted, but no sound came out. I felt the burned pilot's watch against my palm inside my coat pocket. 19 minutes past 2, a moment that had divided my life into before and after. I could have taken out the folder. I could have read Daniel's email aloud. I could have told every person beneath that tent what the army had found and what my brother had chosen to invent. But funerals are not courtrooms, and my father's grave was not a campaign stage, no matter how hard Daniel tried to make it one. So I stepped beyond the chairs and stood near the bare branches of an elm tree. Daniel turned toward the donors. The false victory settled over him easily. Then the government van appeared at the cemetery gate. It moved slowly between the headstones, its headlights pale in morning haze. Daniel checked his watch and straightened his coat. The photographer shifted closer to Mother. Around us, conversations stopped as mourners turned toward the honor guard. I stayed beneath the elm, one hand around the watch, prepared to let the ceremony pass without me. At that moment, I still believed silence was the last respectful thing I could give my father. The honor guard moved with the measured precision of people who understood that grief should never be hurried. 2 soldiers carried the folded flag toward the casket. Another checked the rifle detail beyond the trees. Sergeant First Class Isaac Cole walked at the center of them, his gaze moving across the chairs, the family, and the ground beneath the tent. Then he saw me. He stopped so suddenly that the soldier behind him had to shift sideways. Daniel noticed the break in formation and stepped forward with a welcoming hand. "Sergeant, I'm Daniel Monroe, on behalf of the family." Cole walked past him. The cemetery became quiet enough for me to hear the flag snapping above the administration building. He came toward the elm tree slowly, as though he did not trust what he was seeing. 13 years had added gray to his hair and weight to his shoulders, but his right foot still turned outward slightly. I remembered cutting that boot from his leg, because the swelling had trapped his pulse beneath the leather. He stopped 3 feet in front of me. His eyes dropped to my left hand, where 2 fingers never closed completely. Then they moved to the edge of the burned watch visible between my palm and coat sleeve. "Chief Monroe?" he asked. The title traveled through the mourners like a current. I had not heard it spoken to my face in years. "Yes, Sergeant." Cole took one breath, then he came to attention and raised his hand in a salute. Not a theatrical salute, not something performed for the cameras. It was sharp, formal, and so deeply familiar that my body answered before my mind could catch up. My hand rose. For those few seconds, the cemetery disappeared. I saw dust turning beneath rotor wash, red lights across an instrument panel. Melissa's gloved hand reaching for the emergency checklist. Cole on a litter, trying to lift his head while Reed pressed gauze into the wound above his knee. Then the present returned. Cole lowered his hand. "I thought you were dead," he said. So did I for a little while. His mouth tightened. The expression was not quite a smile. Behind him, the younger soldiers stood motionless. One of them glanced toward Daniel, then back at me. Cole turned to his team, honor guard attention. Every soldier straightened. He faced me again. "Ma'am, I need to confirm. You are retired Chief Warrant Officer 3 Rachel Monroe, United States Army?" "Yes." The director of the Veterans Alliance lifted his head. Daniel said, "There must be some confusion." Cole looked at him for the first time. "No, sir." Daniel gave a small laugh, the kind he used when correcting someone without wanting to appear rude. "My sister left the Army after an incident overseas. She has had some difficulty remembering the circumstances accurately." I felt something inside me become still. Cole did not raise his voice. "I was one of the circumstances." The photographer lowered his camera. Cole turned slightly so the people beneath the tent could see the scar that disappeared beneath his collar. "Our patrol was hit near the Pakistan border," he said. "I had a severed artery in less than an hour if the bleeding held. Weather had closed the route twice. Chief Monroe launched anyway." Daniel's face lost its practiced sympathy. Cole continued. "Her transmission failed on the return flight. She put the aircraft down in a riverbed with almost no rotor control. Then she went back into a burning cabin until everyone still alive was out." Mother covered her mouth. The Veterans Alliance director rose from his chair. Cole's voice remained even. 9 of us came home because she stayed in the air." No one moved. Daniel looked toward me as if I had produced Cole from behind the tree. "You never told us that," he said. I almost answered. Then I remembered the photograph from the folder. Daniel standing behind me at the medal ceremony. My face crossed out in black ink. Cole answered for me. "You were there." The sentence landed harder than any accusation I could have made. Daniel's eyes shifted toward the donors. He was calculating. I could see him searching for a version of events that might still leave him in control. "That ceremony was years ago," he said. "We were told the award was part of her medical retirement." Cole's jaw moved once. The Distinguished Flying Cross is not a retirement gift. The Veterans Alliance director stepped into the aisle. "Mr. Monroe, you told our board your sister received an adverse separation." Daniel turned toward him. "I said the family had been dealing with incomplete information." "No," the director said. "You described her as psychologically unstable and removed for misconduct." "I have the email." The false victory left Daniel's face all at once. Not dramatically, he simply stopped performing. His shoulders dropped. His mouth remained open, but no sentence came. Mother began to cry without sound. No warmth came, only wind against my face. For years I had imagined what it might be like if someone finally corrected the story in front of Daniel. I thought justice would feel warm. Instead, it felt like walking into an empty house after expecting someone to be waiting. Cole looked toward the casket. "I'm sorry about your father, ma'am." "Thank you. There is something else. Your father found me through Tri-County Veterans Alliance 6 weeks ago. He asked me to lead the detail and not contact you beforehand." Cole drew a white envelope from his coat. Dad's block letters spelled my name across it. "The funeral home included it with instructions," he said. "He wanted it opened after we arrived." Mr. Ellis, the funeral director, stepped forward holding a sealed copy of the burial directive. "Mrs. Monroe," he said gently, "I need to verify that we follow the deceased's written instructions." Mother looked at the envelope, then at me. Daniel moved toward Cole. "I'm the executor of the estate." Mr. Ellis placed one hand over the seal. "This is not an estate matter." The words stopped Daniel where he stood. Cole offered me the envelope. I did not take it. My father had written my name, but he had placed the letter inside ceremony governed by rules larger than our family. For once, the truth did not depend on whether I was willing to defend it. Please read it, I said. Cole looked at Mr. Ellis. The funeral director nodded. Around us, the soldiers remained at attention, the folded flag resting between white-gloved hands. Cole broke the seal. Cole unfolded the letter carefully. The paper shook once in the wind, then settled between his gloved hands. He began to read. Rachel, if this letter is being opened at my funeral, then I ran out of time before I found the courage to say these words to your face. I spent years telling myself that silence kept our family together. The truth is that silence protected the person causing the harm and asked the wounded person to carry it quietly. I knew the army cleared you. I knew about the medal. I knew 9 people survived because of what you did. My father had written in the plain language he used when explaining an engine problem. No excuses, only truth, Cole continued. Daniel was angry when you came home. He had built his identity around being the son who stayed, while you became the daughter people admired from a distance. When the accident ended your flying career, he saw a chance to make your life smaller than his. I saw what he was doing. I let him do it. Dad's letter went on. At first I believed the truth would correct itself. Then too much time passed, and correcting it would have required me to admit I had been a coward. Each year my shame became another reason to wait. That is how decent people become partners in cruelty. Not always by agreeing with a lie, but by allowing the liar to speak without consequence. I closed my eyes. I had wanted my father to defend me. I had imagined him correcting Daniel at church, or simply saying my name when someone repeated the story. Instead, he had written the truth in a letter I would hear only after he was gone. I wanted to reject it. The dead do not have to sit across from the people they failed. They do not have to watch forgiveness arrive slowly, or not at all. But I understood his fear because I had lived inside my own version of it. I had called my silence dignity. He had called his silence peace. Both of us had been wrong. Cole read the final paragraph. Rachel, I cannot repair the years I gave away. I can only make one truthful choice at the end. The military honors at my burial are not meant to display my service. They are meant to recognize yours. I have requested that the flag be presented to you. Not because Daniel is less my son, and not because I want to turn my funeral into his punishment. Because you carried this family's shame when it belonged to the rest of us. Please do not carry it any farther. Cole lowered the letter. No one spoke. Mr. Ellis opened the sealed directive and read the identifying line. He looked toward Mother. Mrs. Monroe, your husband named Rachel Monroe as the designated recipient of the burial flag. Mother pressed a tissue against her lips, then she nodded. Yes, she whispered, that is what he wanted. Daniel stepped forward. Mom, you don't have to agree to this. She turned toward him with a steadiness I had not seen in years. I am not agreeing to it, Daniel. I am respecting it. The rifle detail moved into position beyond the trees. 3 volleys broke across the cemetery. The sound entered my chest before I could prepare for it. My fingers closed around the burned watch. For an instant, I was back in the riverbed with fire crawling along the fuselage. Cole saw the change in my face. He did not touch me or ask whether I was all right. He shifted half a step closer, placing himself between me and the crowd until the echoes faded. That small act nearly undid me. A bugler raised his instrument. Taps began. The melody had only 24 notes, but grief does not measure time the way clocks do. By the final note, Mother was crying. One of Daniel's sons had removed his campaign pin. The Veterans Alliance director watched my brother rather than the casket. 2 soldiers lifted the flag. They folded it 13 times, each movement precise, until the cloth became a tight triangle of blue and white stars. Cole received it, then he walked toward me. Daniel remained beside the empty family chair. Cole stopped and lowered himself to one knee. On behalf of the President of the United States Army, and a grateful nation, he said, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your father's honorable and faithful service. He placed it in my hands. The weight surprised me. A burial flag is only cloth, but folded correctly it feels solid. It held my father's years, his failures, his final attempt at honesty, and every conversation we would never finish. I looked at Daniel. He seemed smaller than he had that morning. Not defeated, exposed. The difference mattered. Revenge would have required me to enjoy his humiliation. I did not. I only wanted the lie to stop. Daniel opened his mouth. Before he could speak, the director of the Veterans Alliance stepped between us. Mr. Monroe, he said, our board will review your written statements before making any endorsement decision. Daniel's face tightened. "This is my father's funeral." "Yes," the director replied, "which is why we will discuss your campaign elsewhere." He walked away. No police arrived. No donors shouted. No one tore Daniel's life apart beside the grave. Consequences rarely enter with sirens. Sometimes they begin with a respected man refusing to shake your hand. I held the flag against my coat. Then I moved to the empty chair beside Mother and sat down. After the burial, people formed groups along the path to the parking lot. Some approached Mother, a few spoke to Cole, most avoided Daniel. He stood near the chapel steps with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in an urgent voice. The photographer had left, so had the county commissioners. I did not wait to hear whom he was calling. Mother asked me to ride with her to the house. For the first 10 minutes, neither of us spoke. The folded flag rested on my lap. Dad's letter lay beneath it, its edges moving whenever the heater came on. At a red light, Mother said I knew more than I admitted. I looked through the windshield. How much? Enough. That answer hurt, but at least it was honest. She told me Daniel had asked her to support his version of the accident after he began campaigning. He said questions about my service would distract from Dad's illness and expose private family matters. Mother had agreed because she feared conflict, then repeated the lie so often that correcting it felt impossible. "I kept waiting for your father to fix it," she said. So did I. She began to cry. I did not tell her everything was all right. It was not. At the house, Daniel arrived 20 minutes later. He entered through the garage without knocking, still wearing his funeral coat. "The Alliance suspended the endorsement," he said. "They want a review." Mother removed her gloves, one finger at a time. "You lied to them. I protected this family." "No," I said. "You protected a version of yourself." Daniel turned toward me. "You could have corrected people years ago." The old part of me almost accepted the blame. Instead, I placed Dad's letter on the table. "I should have spoken sooner," I said. "That was my mistake. What you did with my silence was yours." He stared at the paper. "What do you want?" It was the question he understood best. A demand, a price, a way to turn harm into negotiation. "I want you to send the Alliance the investigation summary. I want you to correct every statement you made about my discharge. And I want my name kept out of your campaign, and if I don't, then the truth remains true." I did not threaten him with reporters or lawyers. The Alliance already had his email. The consequences no longer required my assistance. Daniel looked toward Mother. She did not rescue him. He left without saying goodbye. 3 months later, he withdrew from the county council race. The public statement cited family obligations. I never challenged the wording. Losing an election was not the point. He had lost the privilege of using my life as material. Mother and I began speaking once a week. Some conversations lasted 5 minutes. Some ended badly. Forgiveness did not arrive as a single decision. It came as a series of smaller choices, each with its own conditions. Daniel sent the corrected military record to the Alliance. He also mailed me a 2-page apology drafted in the careful language of someone still trying to control how he was judged. I read it once, then I put it in the same fireproof box as the medal. I did not answer. That spring, Cedar Ridge invited me to speak at a support meeting for families of injured service members. I declined the stage and volunteered at the registration table instead. Cole attended with his wife. Before he left, he placed a new leather strap beside my coffee. "For the watch," he said. I replaced the burned strap but kept the cracked face. Repair does not always mean erasing the evidence. On the first anniversary of Dad's death, I returned to the cemetery alone. I placed the watch against the headstone for a moment, then fastened it back around my wrist. It still read 19 minutes past 2. For years, I thought that frozen time marked the moment my useful life ended. I understand it differently now. It marks the moment 9 people were given more time. My father's final letter did not repair our family. Truth rarely rebuilds everything it exposes, but it gave me back the part of my life I had allowed other people to name. I left the cemetery before sunset. The flag remained in my home, protected behind glass. Dad's letter stayed folded beneath it, not as proof that he had finally chosen me. As a reminder that love without courage can become another form of abandonment. If this story stayed with you, share it. If dignity does not require disappearing, subscribe. My brother said Dad did not want a disgraced soldier at his funeral. When the honor guard arrived, they did not ask me to leave. They asked for me.